Good evening and welcome everybody. My name is Laura Day, I'm with St.Ation, and today I'm here with Maisie McDavid, hoping to become your next Director of Wellbeing. In the next 10-15 minutes, I'll be asking Maisie a few questions about her manifesto and the person behind it to help you decide who to vote for later this week. So with introductions over, let's get started with some questions about your manifesto. So first of all, I've asked all the other candidates this. COVID has affected absolutely everything in our lives, but how has it impacted your manifesto?
I think it's definitely made me consider things that I wouldn't necessarily have considered before. That's probably the basic answer for it. I think because of COVID, it's made us kind of realize the importance of communicating really well when things change and plans change and people knowing what the union is doing about it. And I think that's kind of what inspired like my policy on the support packages, is that we've seen a lot of improvements in the way that the university communicates with us over the past year, especially with, Sally Mapstone being a bit more active and reaching out to us, and especially the last union president, Jamie Rodney, a bit of a shout out there, with his really good communication of constantly dishing out surveys. And and I think that's something that I would like to continue. And I think some of my policies, like the support packages, have also been inspired by COVID, because there needs to be more information on for people when they're isolating, like how to look after their well-being, especially for shielding students and students at home as well, where they're not surrounded by this St. Andrew's community. And I'd say that it's definitely impacted in a way that I think looking at ways that students can feel like they're receiving active support from the union, and not having it sort of passive and like go and look at this website, go and look at that website, but us actively reaching out to students. And I think, I would say that's mostly how it's influenced my manifesto.
That sounds great. Hopefully we'll be able to return to some level of normality in the not too distant future. In your manifesto under academia and wellbeing, one of your policies involves ensuring proper mandatory class breaks between lessons. I know that I've been in classes which, despite assurance from module coordinators, have run over time. So how would you plan to enforce this policy?
I think, I think it could be added on to the kind of reporting process of students being able to flag up, like I mentioned in one of my policies, having students being able to flag up when they're unhappy about an extension. And students can also, in this reporting process, flag up in different classes and situations, and almost acts as like statistical evidence for the amount of times that people are just not getting class breaks, and kind of figuring out, if we manage to kind of crunch the numbers and see whether class breaks are even happening at all and implemented properly, I think will be really important. And I think I've also included in my manifesto about providing a guide to staff about how they should communicate with students who are facing difficult situations, because a lot of students have received a lot of kind of hostility from staff upon reaching out to them and don't feel properly supported. And I think in this guide we can say, we can provide the advice as much as possible to please just stop, take a break with whatever you're doing. It's very, of course, we have to acknowledge it's very difficult to make it and implement it as mandatory. We can only advise the staff so far. But if we're able to provide these guides on student wellbeing and get staff to acknowledge that this is really important and these are the kind of medical conditions that it's really important to have these breaks for, then I think would be good.
Breaks are definitely important, so it's nice to see that included in your manifesto. You also mentioned the importance of student representation in your manifesto, so how will you ensure that all voices are heard and taken into consideration when enacting change?
I think finding the simplest ways as possible of communicating with students will be really important. Because I think a lot is put down on students reading like weekly union emails or emails from the proctor or emails from, and not a lot of people do that. So I think it's almost myself as a SAB, I would like to things as simple as making polls on Facebook and Instagram and being present on social media, because this is the places that people listen to and pay attention to. And I think also I mention it like throughout a few of my policies in the manifesto, is that using advantage of school president emails, because I know that these ones people tend to pay a little bit more attention to. And I think that would be really key to communicating with students about the kind of help that they need and what is available.
That's great. So next question is about first years, because they've had an incredibly challenging start to their university careers. They've missed out on an awful lot of different things. So what additional support would you put in place as Director of Wellbeing to help incoming students adjust to life at St Andrews?
I think so. I have a couple of policies specifically targeted at halls and implementing the workshops and making them kind of standardized from got consent, got confidence, got support, and having those at the beginning and dishing out this is what information we have available, because I think it's really great at the moment that got confidence we do go into halls, but also it'd be great to have that same kind of thing for mental health issues and got limits as well. And I think one of the biggest changes I would like to make is having student services counsellors being able to come into halls and running support groups for those students who maybe they're not really sure about reaching out for appointments and such, and so they want to meet, maybe do it with a friend and see what the experience is like, and just being able to chat in an almost informal setting about the challenges that they are facing, because mostly that is what the counsellors do. They're there to chat about the challenges you're facing, and I think making like an appointment about it can seem like a really big thing. So getting student services to come and see you would be great. I'd also like to emphasize as well myself being a first generation student, and just not feeling like I knew what university was and what's kind of expected of you. It was all just, I felt a bit in the dark. And so I think creating a support package for students who maybe don't really know what university life is like and what kind of the expectations are, particularly in terms of academic skills and career experience, would be super important.
That sounds great. Obviously the ongoing restrictions have had a major impact on the usual campaign process that you'd be in right now. But I noticed that you've come up with a strategy to increase the number of likes on your campaign page. How did you come up with that idea?
Well, I think it's slightly inspired by Tom Groves' campaign last year. He did a bit of a similar approach where if he got so many likes, he would make a video about some crazy challenge. I'm slightly more safety conscious than he is, and don't particularly want bad news or anything like that. So, I think just inspired by his, and then trying to emphasize the importance of getting people engaged on the page, because I know a lot of people like just kind of look at your page and like, it's another elections candidate, but actually trying to get people to feel like they're involved in the process. So yeah, took inspiration.
Well, now that we've explored your manifesto a little bit further, it's time to find out a little bit more about you, the person behind the policies. So first of all, what inspired you to run for Director of Wellbeing?
I think it was mostly just knowing about, well, being advertised this role, and then realizing that the role of Director of Wellbeing is something that I can make changes for, you know, all of the problems that my friends and myself have experienced and the people that I know. And I think especially in this past year, from constantly hearing about people kind of struggling in terms of mental health, and everything that's been raised about from St. Andrew survivors. And I think those two things have always been really important to me. And I really want to be able to ensure that everybody in St. Andrews now is able to have an even better experience, and we continue to improve and address. I've noticed real gaps in things that are not really addressed, such as social anxiety issues, and especially sexual violence. It's not much has happened in way of that, and communicating information. And so from these ideas, I decided that there was something that I could do, I could really contribute, and it would be great to spend a year doing that.
That's great. I mean, you've obviously worked really hard on your manifesto and your campaign, but what or who inspires you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think, I think it inspires me when I see other students who just sort of build things from the ground up, and like, yeah, just meeting people who've like set up their own societies and are really trying to implement change in St. Andrews, and like with what the St. Andrews survivors have done, just out of nowhere made this Instagram, and it's made such a huge impact. And I think that is inspiring in a way, because yeah, it shows just how much just a change just a couple of students can make into the community. And I guess that's really inspiring. In terms of people, I guess I would say, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Well, as Greta Thunberg said, no, even one person can make a very big difference. So, in the final minute, I'd like to give you the opportunity to say something to everybody who's watching at home. So why should they vote Maisie McDavid for Director of Wellbeing?
So I want to say that I have a plan, I have a strategy, and I know how I'm going to implement this, and I will do that. But also along the way, what's ultimately important is this, what students want and student voices. And I'm here for you. I'm here to listen to you. And I'm here to make the changes that students want to see. And I will adapt my agenda to fit everybody else's. And I also have a fresh perspective to the role. I think coming from being involved in a lot of different things throughout university, I've interacted with a lot of different groups of people. And I think that will be really important in trying to cover all aspects of well-being and not brushing under the carpet one thing over the other. And most of all, I want to share student stories and listen to student voices and really make these changes happen. Yeah.
And with that, I'd like to thank Maisie McDavid very much for participating in this interview. I wish you the very best of luck with your campaign.